Okay, for this week we're going to take a more in-depth look at Adobe Animate, and you're going to learn to create an Adobe CC file, Adobe Animate CC file. You're going to understand the different Animate document types, and we'll talk about the stage and document properties, working with layers and the timeline, and you'll understand and know how to work with keyframes, which are an important part of working with animation and Adobe Animate. And we'll take a look at importing images to the library, etc. And it's important that you read Chapter 1, Getting Acquainted, in the Adobe Animate CC 2019 Classroom in a Book by Russell Chun, and that I'll get you started on the case that he gives you. You need to continue to work through it on your own and then complete the assignment this week, which is to create an ad for Jack's Jerky. I want to emphasize that it's important to read the book and watch my videos and practice using Animate. The more you use it, the more proficient you'll become. It's also important that you take a look at the Adobe Animate tutorials on the Adobe Help website. Get started with the beginner tutorials, and they don't necessarily have them sequenced in the order that I think is relevant or good for scaffolding learning. But I would recommend that for this week you review what is Animate, get to know the timeline, and take a look at motion tweens. Don't worry about the 2D character just yet. That's a little bit advanced, and definitely don't do any of these. If you scroll down, there are some what they call beginner tutorials, and creating VR and panoramic 360 is by no means a beginner. I would recommend that you start here in drawing and animate, and rest assured that we'll cover these things as well together. And so let's take a look at Adobe Animate. To get started with Animate, you can simply on the PC go to your Start button and find Adobe Animate CC 2019 on your Start menu, or on the Mac you can go to Finder or find it on your browse on your dock, and then launch. Double click the icon to launch Adobe Animate. And when you do that, this is what you're going to see. Now your screen may be a little bit different than mine, but in general this is what you see when you'll launch it. Here you'll see by default the start screen will open to home, and you have the option to go to learn if you want to learn more about Animate. Here you can find more tutorials, but you'll start here. You can either open an Animate file or work with recent files, and by default, and you'll also find the tutorials down here. By default, what you'll find when you launch Animate is these 7 tabs with presets that are appropriate to creating different types of Animate movies: character animation, social, game, education, which I think Adobe is still enhancing, and then ads, which we'll talk about today, the web, and then advanced. When we click advanced, you'll see an entire plethora of the different things that we're going to talk about this semester. We get started with Animate, but you see here from advanced you can create a movie using HTML5 Canvas, WebGL, VR, Panorama, and VR 360, which are now in beta. ActionScript 3, which is similar to JavaScript, and it's an older format. Air for Desktop, which is also an older format that allows you to create basically desktop applications. So eventually, here shortly, Air will be going away, and so will ActionScript 3. And you can also code and various flavors of ActionScript, etc. And so for the most part, you can start with advanced and then make all your specifications here. And so what we're going to do is we're just going to play around with some graphics and learn how to use the timeline. And if you wanted to follow along in your book or in your reading, I'm going to be on page 5 in your book. And so what we'll do is we'll stick with advanced and we'll select ActionScript 3, and then you could see some things changed here. When I went to HTML5 Canvas, we could see it here in the details. When I go to ActionScript 3, you can see how things change. Let's make a movie that is roughly 800 by 600. So this is custom dimension, not the default. 800 by 600 pixels, so you get a variety of different units to create your movie at, and you can specify and make one default. The frame rate by default is 24 frames per second, which is about normal for an animate movie. And then let's go ahead and click create. And when we do, the entire environment changes. And what you're looking at is the user interface for Adobe Animate in what's called the Essential Layout. And starting from the top all the way down in a nice little Z pattern to the bottom, what you see here is kind of a standard menu bar or application bar, as Adobe calls it. On this side, on the left, we have our Tools panel. You might have your Tools panel over here. And so if I go back and I say Reset Essentials and click Yes, see how it puts the Tools panel over here. But I'm an old Flash guy. I've been using Flash for a long time. So you can float these panels. I like to dock the Tools panel over here, and I adjust its width so the tools run long and parallel to the stage. But then I go back and have to clean it up. So you have to do a lot of customization, and these panels are pretty finicky. And so I like to use this layout that I call Curtis, or Curtis 2, which is pretty much what you saw. And so you can customize the panels based on what you need, or you can use some of the defaults like Animator, Classic, Designer, Developer, etc. And so continuing the layout, these are our Tools panel here. Here we have the stage, and then outside the stage we have the workspace that we can work with. We can store things outside the stage. Anything outside the stage doesn't show up in the animation, so that's kind of, you can consider it like overflow area in HTML. And you can see that we have an untitled movie open on scene 1. This movie has one scene, and if you're used to After Effects, you might recognize that they have something similar. Like we can have scenes. In After Effects we have compositions, so we can have multiple scenes within a movie. Over here we have the ability to edit the scene and symbols. We can center the stage. We can zoom in and out if we want to. We can zoom out to see the stage at 50%. And then down here we have the timeline, and by default the timeline starts with one layer. This is timeline 1. And I won't talk about all these things here, but this is the timeline, and this is the first layer, and each of these are frames. And you can see that since we're running at 24 frames per second, then 1 second is 24 frames. Now, I can't scrub with the playhead. This is the playhead because we don't have any frames there. And you can zoom in on the timeline by using this slider. This becomes helpful as your timeline grows, so you can shrink it or expand it So it's good to work with it about halfway there. And so that's pretty much the quick lay of the land. Well, what we're going to do is we'll um, get to work and animate. But before you do, I want you to select File and then save this. Make sure that you save it. I don't want to save it there. But create a folder or someplace where you can save it. And I'm calling it Lab 2 Demo. But you can call it whatever you want. You can save it or what have you. In the book they give you some specific name, but I'm just going to call this Demo 1. And notice that it saves as an FLA file. So this format again is going to be going away. So you might be wondering, what the heck is an FLA file? Well, an FLA is an old Flash format, and stands for Flash Animation, and that's what we're going to work with right now. But you notice that there's also another format, an Animate Uncompressed format. But when we work with Canvas, then we're going to be saving this thing as HTML. And so go ahead and save it, and you don't have to worry about it. You're not going to turn this in. We're just going to work together on it. So this is a good point for us to kind of stop, and then I'll start recording another second part of the demo. If you have any questions, post them to the questions forum.